Hello and welcome to The Appointment. I am Pranjal Sharma. Joining me today is Patu Keswani. He's the founder of the Lemon Tree Group of Hotels. Patu, thanks very much for sharing your time with us.
It's my pleasure.
You had a very interesting entrepreneurial journey, from being a professional to getting into a startup. How has been the experience of that transition? You clearly have a successful chain now.
Well, I guess you're right. My whole family, their background is they're engineers or doctors or actually artists. My sisters are theater artists and actresses. But the point is that in my family, we've mostly been government servants. So my decision to become an entrepreneur was about, now it's 13 years ago. And it was basically a very random decision, not thought through. I wanted to retire. And I had just made a sufficient amount of money to build a very small hotel, which I looked at as an annuity. So effectively, I wanted to build a tiny hotel, which I did in Gurgaon. And my view was that if it would earn enough money to, take care of me and my kids' education, then I was a happy guy. And I was lucky because when I started, that was the intention. It was not to build a chain. But when I started, my colleagues who came on board with me, who had worked with me in the past in the Taj, about 8 of them, they said, why don't we, it was very successful, the first hotel. So they said, why don't we try a second? So it's, normal, unplanned growth, so to speak. And in the next 3 or 4 years, from 2002, when I started the company, to 2006, we had 6 hotels, of which 3 were built and 3 were under construction.
So you were a reluctant entrepreneur?
I was an involuntary entrepreneur. Not even reluctant. There was no reluctance there, really. There was a total absence of thought. And when I look back on it today, I'm amazed that I did it.
It's interesting how you say that, because a lot of people, when they start their ventures, especially in a very competitive and difficult to enter sector like hospitality, they have this grand plan of, you can't do a standalone, you must sort of look at a long-term plan. You also created a segment which nobody had really focused on. So was that also involuntary, or did you have some thought behind that?
I was quite clear. See, the hotel sector in India, more than 70% of the hotels are owned by individuals. If you look at while a lot of them are branded, the ownership is not with the international brand, it is with individuals.
Right.
Now, if I looked across the entire spectrum of hotels, when I started Lemon Tree, most of the hotels in India were upper upscale, which is like 5-star or better, more than 2/3. So imagine as a market, so to speak, that 2/3 of if I take the airlines as an example, 2/3 of the airline seats in India are business class. Obviously, it implies that there must be a big opportunity at the economy level, right, or at the low-cost carrier level. The problem in India was that it was very difficult to build a financially successful hotel in the mid-market zone, which is why enough hotels hadn't come up. Second reason, I think why there were not many mid-market hotels was because most individuals who built hotels were also looking at it as a statement. So if the difference between a 5-star hotel and a 3-star hotel is not very, very significant, and in India, strangely, it is not, then if you had a choice, you'd say, why not build a 5-star? It added to your stature from that perspective. So I was lucky. I entered a market which was skewed, where supply was, far less, where it should have been far more. And the only challenge was the structural issue of building a hotel which would give you an adequate financial return.
So you said that, one of the tough things was about creating a financially successful model at the mid-level category. How did you crack that?
Very simple. You see, if you look at the developed market for hotels, it's really the US. I mean, US is a classic example because it has 6% of the world's population, or probably 5 now, and it has 25% of the world's hotel rooms. So it's an amazing market. Very developed, very clear differentiation across brands, segments, so on and so forth. So if you look at the US, the real difference across 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, 2-star is not product so much, which is the physical building, it's the service levels. Because the very high cost in inputs in the US is labor. So, you will get room service in a 5-star and you won't get room service in a 3-star. In India, it's the exact reverse. Labor costs are relatively low still, But the cost of product is very high, fundamentally because cost of land is high, cost of debt is high, gestation of debt is, short. So it's structural issues that actually were a barrier to creating a financially successful 3-star hotel. Now you've got to keep in mind whether it's a 1-star or a guest house or a 5-star hotel in India, Indian customers want full service. They want everything. Okay, so the only difference between, in my opinion, a guest house and a lemon tree is we offer nearly full services, so does a guest house, but the difference is in the professional quality of services offered. Not in the range of services, but in the quality. Coming back to my original point, which was that if you looked at the product side, the difference between a 5-star and a 3-star, for it to be successful, had to be that the 3-star was half cost. Okay, roughly 50% of the price.
In terms of the cost
of the total cost of setting up the room. Now, if you did not want to trade off on location, because in India, there is hardly any public infrastructure as far as transport goes, then location becomes equally important whether you're staying in a 5-star or a 3-star. Therefore, you can't save money in the land. I mean, you have to put up, like I have a hotel here, which is adjoining a 5-star deluxe hotel. So I have not saved money on land. The cost of land has been the same for both of us. So therefore, what's the solution? Solution is very simple: build smaller rooms. So if a 5-star deluxe hotel in a certain size of land builds 100 rooms, I wanted to build 200 rooms. Therefore, my cost per room would be half.
And of course, the revenue per room would be.
So the revenue per room would also be half, providing my cost per room was half. So how do you do that? I reduced not the room size as much as the public area size.
Great. So at this point, we'll take a short break. Patu, when I come back, I will talk about the growth plans of the Lemon Tree Group and also life in the hospitality industry with Patu Keswani, founder of the Lemon Tree Group. Stay with us. You joined me, Pranjal Sharma, on the appointment. I'm talking to Patu Keswani, the founder of the Lemon Tree Group of Hotels. Patu, the growth strategy is also interesting because you started with a single mid-level hotel chain, but now you again segmentized it. You have the Premier and then you have the Red Fox. So where is this mid-market really going, and what is your strategy on that? Okay, so when we started Lemon Tree, we were clear, as I mentioned this to you earlier, that Indian customers want more service. So how do you offer it, in a way which is financially viable? We said Lemon Tree, in its original avatar, would be a 3-star product with 4-star service levels, because we were very clear Indians wanted more service than normal in that category, so to speak. What are your expansion plans? You are at, I think, 26 properties now. Where do you see the growth coming from? Yeah.
Most of them are Lemon Tree Premier because these are big city center hotels. So we are building 2 hotels in Bombay, we are adding, we're going to own 1,000 rooms in Bombay in the next 3 years. We are building a large hotel in Pune, in the city center. We are building a resort in Udaipur. We are building a hotel in Calcutta because we've not been to the east so far. And we are building a few smaller hotels in Gurgaon and in Shimla and so on and so forth. Going forward, our plan is not so much oriented towards which brand we will build. We are looking at the leisure market because to me, it's a very simple mathematical calculation. We have today about 1 million visitors who stay in our hotels. And if we just asked ourselves a simple question, which is that all these visitors...
1 million visitors per day?
Per year. Okay. Who stay with us. About, I think it's about 980,000.
Right.
These guests also go for holidays. Okay. And I'm very encouraged to note that a lot of Indians now have actually started have actually started going for holidays. I remember, 25, 30 years ago, when I should have gone for holidays, I hardly did. And most of my colleagues also did, and friends. So today I see an average guest who stays with me maybe 10 times a year is also going for a holiday 2 or 3 times a year. And they all are loyal customers.
So where is this market going? Because you're saying that you're moving into leisure, but the original concept of Lemon Tree of providing for the business travelers to a large extent, how big do you expect this overall market to be, and where do you see yourself in that?
Okay, so let me tell you our plan. You're absolutely right. When we started Lemon Tree, we were focused as a, as a business hotel company. But like any company, we evolved. What we understood was that we were not capturing the full share of wallet of our customers. So let's take, somebody who's working in a company like, hypothetically, an IT company. So when he joins in his first 10 years or first 5 years, he's going to stay in a Red Fox category. That's his entitlement. 5 years later, he's senior enough, he moves into a Lemon Tree. 5 years later, he moves into a Lemon Tree Premier. And then he falls off because then he's going to stay in a 5-star. So the creation of 3 brands was really to capture the life cycle of his business days. But I'm completely missing out on his leisure stay. And why should I? For 2 reasons. One is I want to capture the full share of wallet of this guest. And more importantly, I don't want somebody else to capture him, in his leisure side and then move into my business space by capturing his loyalty for his personal visits. So strategically, it makes sense. It's a very natural expansion of the brand, an extension. And my forward view is very simple. And, why it all ties in for us is I think a lot of Indians, as, the GDP grows, disposable income grows, are going to start spending money on entertainment and travel. So we want to capture the domestic leisure market. And therefore, next 10 years, if you ask me, we will build more resorts than business hotels.
At this point, we'll take a break, and Patu Keswani will stay with us, and I'm going to ask him what should the government do actually to encourage this market of domestic travelers who are looking for better options in leisure and entertainment. Stay with us on The Appointment. You join me, Pranjal Sharma, on The Appointment. With me is Patu Keswani. He is the founder of the Lemon Tree Group of Hotels. Patu, you talked about the growing market of the domestic traveler. We see again a lot of exciting things happening. There are the hotel aggregators who are coming up now. At the same time, the global chains are also entering the market. Do you see Lemon Tree being sort of squeezed between the aggregators who are offering rooms at maybe 1,000 of existing facilities versus the really big guys?
No, I have a different view. My view is that the rate of growth of the Indian market is, of course, it is cyclical because, demand for hotel rooms goes in an exaggerated way with the rate and, the rise and fall of the rate of growth of the economy. But if I look at the next 5 to 10 years, and we normally have a 10-year perspective because hotels are obviously long gestation projects. I see that the Indian customer, the demand for hotel rooms by the Indian consumer will be far greater on a long-term basis than the supply that is coming in. Okay? So while whether it's an international chain which really operates from 3-star and up, or whether it's these aggregators who are really aggregating what I call the disorganized part of the market, which is really guest houses or very small non-branded, unbranded hotels. They are operating for their peculiar demand-supply conditions. I'm in the middle. I'm neither really competing with the aggregators, at present that is, nor am I competing with the international chains. Of course, there is intersection, but it's not significant. So I want to grow in the hardcore mid-market branded hotel space, where long-term, the only competition I see is with international chains. But international chains are not investing in India. They're really managing other people's hotels. Whereas we are, we have invested close to, at present, about $800 million in India. So we are one of the few asset owners here and operators. And we see that as a competitive advantage because it enables us to grow in a strategic way. For example, Once we capture a certain market, say we are in Delhi, then we can go and build a hotel in Chandigarh because 80% or 70% of Chandigarh's demand comes from Delhi.
Correct.
So by being ready to invest in assets, we can actually sequence our expansion.
But you are bullish about the growth of the market. How do you see the government's role both at the state and the central level in terms of encouraging the industry? You've had your set of challenges as an entrepreneur, but is it easier today for you to run your hotel business? What would you like the government to do?
Well, the most encouraging thing I have seen is that Mr. Modi announced those 5 T's.
And tourism is a T, right?
Okay, so we know that the chief executive of the country is saying, one of his focus areas is tourism, and as it should be, because here's the tragedy. India gets 7 million international tourists. The Ministry of Tourism tells us that there are 900 million domestic tourists. I don't know how they calculate this, but certainly there are a lot of Indians who, for leisure reasons, are traveling, all over the country. So if I look at it purely from the numbers side,
907.
I'm hearing there are 100 more domestic tourists than international tourists. So obviously, if I'm looking at the mid-market and I want to grow, I need the government to help me capture these domestic tourists, whether it is through connectivity, whether it is through, just providing better facilities. Now, that's really not a central government job. It is more a state government job. But I would love to see more airlines operate, because I find I'm actually quite amazed that airlines are losing money in India and yet they seem to be charging very high fares. So there is some issue here which I have not understood.
So what are the things you would like, so I think one of the things that the government is doing in terms of improving the visa on arrival facilities,
yes,
so that the inflow of foreign tourists goes up, to encourage more domestic internal tourism. What are the couple of things that you would request and suggest that the government take up?
One is make land available specifically for hotels. Auction it by all means. Let the hotel companies compete for it. But today land can be used for many things. Somebody puts up, the government puts up a plot of land for auction. It can be used for commercial, for retail, for hotels, and we come last, in terms of returns. A hotelier can never compete with a developer if the option is to build a commercial tower, as an example, very broadly. So the government should make specific land use plots available which are specifically for hotels.
And not just a generic commercial space, as you said.
That is correct.
And I'm talking to you at your property in AeroCity next to the T3 terminal. This perhaps could be an example, because this area was created only for hotels.
That is correct.
So, but more such models.
Not only that, Pranjal, you should also have enough plots. See, for too often, the government has used the plot, the hotel plots, and controlled the supply in such a way that they are looking for the maximum bid. Now, if in a city, as an example, if in AeroCity, they had only made 1 plot available instead of 12, 20 people would have bid for it, and the price would have been absurd. And finally, whoever had gotten it would have put up a 5-star deluxe hotel, because that's the only way he would have recovered his cost. So it's essential you put up a sufficiently large number of plots that enough buyers come in, put up hotels, and therefore, as you very rightly said, a hospitality district is often the answer, near major transport points like, Delhi Airport, Bombay Airport, and so on.
Are the state governments realizing this?
I think the central government is realizing it, and certainly state governments are also gradually realizing it. But if you ask me very honestly, I think the hotel industry has not done enough to educate the public, the government, the bureaucracy, as to the massive advantages that tourism engenders. Every time you invest, say, 1 crore rupees in the tourism business, you could probably create 10 to 12 jobs, which is much more than is commonly recognized.
But finally, I think what you're saying is also very importantly that the government's thinking is really about the top-end hotels, but if you're looking at the figures that the tourism ministry talks about, the 900 million domestic travelers, you have to have focus on the lower and mid segments, and therefore the cost of land, the cost of doing business, and the cost of capital have to be more affordable.
Yeah. So the two other things I think which the government can do, which will help a lot, besides making land available, besides improving the general infrastructure and connectivity, the other two things is to create hotels as long gestation infrastructure projects, so that we get access to funds on a longer term basis than we do today at lower costs of rates of interest. That's one. Number two is tax it less. Even to this day, the government thinks of hotels as an elite, five-star hotels. If you ask somebody, most people in India, they think, if you say the word hotels, they think five-star. It's like you say photocopier, most people say Xerox. Or chocolate, people still say Cadbury. You say hotels, people say five-star. So we need to educate, we need to create enough, to create, so it's a cycle, to create enough mid-market supply, we need to educate the government, that hotels does not mean five-star. It is a mass market product, and you have to help, they have to help us create enough supply.
Thanks, Patu. That's a very positive thought. Thanks very much for being with us.